It started off with a Valentine's card, a very filthy message. I didn't know who this person was who would send it to me. And then thereafter, I was receiving letters through the post. Some person had taken an obsession with me, whoever this was. He remained anonymous. He was a sadistic sexual predatory stalker. Eventually, when I found out who this person was, the police charged him. He still continued his lewd behaviour. The police dismissed that. They didn't see it was worth recording. And eventually he was allowed to enter into a plea bargain process with the Procurator Fiscal. So what was a large amount of behaviours over 2 years, various types of behaviours, were condensed into a few letters, which was disproportionate to the amount of behaviours that I had experienced. It was breach of the peace at that point because there was no law against stalking. It wasn't even recognised. The sheriff, in his opinion, decided this man was not a danger to the public, and with a very lenient sentence, 260 hours community service, 3 years in the sexual offenders register, that man walked out of court. What was overlooked was the impact this had had on my life, the anxiety, the stress. And it was also the impact on my physical health. My hair fell out, I lost weight, I suffered migraines, my nervous system was starting to break down as well. Living with that level of anxiety for over 2 years, waiting and not knowing when this act was going to happen or how it was going to happen, really took me to the brink of even considering suicide ideation, because I didn't know whether I was going to survive it, and if I did, what would that be like for me? I was the one that had to relocate. No one would guarantee he would respect his court orders. He hadn't respected the law before. Gave up my business, left behind my home family of 30 years, and I relocated 80 miles away. Social work had helped him find new employment to help rehabilitate and get him back on his feet, and yet I'm the one that had to move away and paid the high price of his behaviour. So I stood up, spoke out, I launched my campaign Action Scotland Against Stalking, and I was determined that stalking was to be a criminal offence within Scottish law, that psychological harm, psychological impact was to be a governing criteria of an offence. I was forced to engage with a system that only recognised crimes of a physical and material nature. That had to change. It was very hard. It was really about who was going to support me and who was not going to support me. I found out that the people against introducing stalking legislation into Scotland were the Scottish Government. They didn't think they needed it. The police, the Crown Office and the Criminal Justice Service as a whole. They felt that breach of the peace sufficed. There was such a wave of support behind me from victim support services, from other organisations out with government and criminal justice, such a wave of support. But I'd also put out a platform for victims to come forward. So they started to write into their MSPs, they started to write into the Scottish Government, and this platform of voices highlighted all those victims that had been ignored and dismissed all these years. That brought in the offence of stalking into criminal law. But more needs to change, because what's happened is that stalking has still been subsumed by other crimes such as ex-partner, domestic abuse, rape, sexual crimes. Physical violence still takes centre stage. Stalking still not being recognised as a standalone criminal offence that warrants a place alongside those other very serious forms of violence. Statistics are saying 11.8% of men and women were stalked within a 12-month period. So this is a high prevalence crime within our society. So the government needs to do more to reach out and encourage those victims to come forward. Hidden victims who cannot corroborate the crime, so their complaints can't go forward to charge number one. We've got all those other hidden victims, such as men who are victims of stalking. They're not being represented properly. And the other area that's not being represented is really the true recognition that stalking is not all about ex-partner stalking. We've got acquaintance stalking, stalking within our workplace. We've got neighbourhood stalking. Young people are being stalked. And yet when it comes to a young person, it's called bullying and harassment. We know that victims don't report to the police until they have received X number of behaviours or incidents. So as soon as they realise that this is persistent and unwanted behaviour, start keeping a log of everything, and they must start to gather as much evidence as possible. If it's through emails or Facebook, take screenshots, keep a copy of any voicemail, any texts, anything, even photographs, anything that's left for the victim to find around the victim's house. Take photographs. That is evidence the police need to corroborate the crime. And secondly, if you are being stalked, then please phone the police. The support offered by Victim Support Scotland is crucial. They will support that victim throughout the whole process, emotionally and practical support throughout.